Yeah, so time to start. My name is Dawid Pacia. I came from Krakow, but I spent last a year and a half in Kyiv, so it's kind of familiar city for me. I worked for PetCube, so we've been doing smart cameras for pets with laser and so on. You can know it. I think it's the most popular startup in Kyiv, not in Ukraine, because you have Grammarly. But yeah. So, actually, that's my third time here, so it's kind of hat trick. So for the first time, it was not the best speech. So today, whatever happens, it will be better. The second one was last year. It was more accidentally one, lightning speech. And this year, I am for the third time. Oh, and regarding hat trick, somehow I landed yesterday at Dynamo match, football match. Well played. Good luck in next round. And I must say, it's much safer to support football clubs here because you have just one big club. In Krakow, we have 3 of them, and it's not that comfortable to talk about football. Okay, let's keep going. Who have ever heard about TestOps or TestOps description? Yeah, it's not that new, but still quite uncommon. And who have heard about DevOps? Okay, much more people. And actually what I discovered, even DevOps is not so popular. I mean, everyone says they have DevOps, but they just say they have DevOps. They do not really practice DevOps. And I will show how to integrate this DevOps approach with some process automation. And it disappeared. Okay, yeah, that's the slide I put at every presentation starting last year, because to deliver better speech, I had a personal coach. It was not my decision, but who cares and who want to argue with your wife? So he suggested to put the smart sentence at the beginning because it's like the purpose of good speech. So I put that one. And I really hope it's not the smartest thing you will listen here. Okay, what? Yeah, that's the not super responsive. Okay, so we can agree that's the traditional model of software testing. You have tests, then you run those tests on any system, whatever it is. It's software, hardware. Then you have test results, you analyze, and then you decide if it pass or fail. You have red, green. Pretty simple, like traffic lightnings. But during the last 2 presentations, I sit here, there were a lot of mentions like what happens last year and was fast enough is not fast enough this year. And probably it won't be fast enough next year. So I have some data because we like numbers, especially those big numbers for big companies. So you have Facebook sending average over 31 million messages every minute. Then you have Twitter generating 3,050 tweets each minute. And then you have Google with almost 1 billion searches each day. And finally, to finalize those big names, you have Amazon delivering software every 11 seconds. So we do it fast. We deliver software as fast and as often as possible. And because of that, something like TestOps happened. And I try to find if there is such offer as TestOps. Of course there is, because if you can have position like Java Ninja or HR Magician, then why not TestOps? And then I realized when I created offer for test automation, I put some knowledge and competencies that should cover this TestOps as well, which means, for example, Jenkins administration know-how. It's continuous integration or delivery part. So it was 2 or even 3 years ago, and now it's even more popular. So if we have that offer, then we have the concept provided by Seth Elliott and I totally agree with that concept. I will focus mostly on one part, but let me explain what's going on here. So TestOps is like combination of testing and DevOps. It's pretty simple, or even more testing, development, and ops part. And you have on the left side exposure control, what that really is. Who knows the description of canary release or A/B testing? So that's exactly it. Canary release means you provide your software to 1%, then you aggregate data, then you check if that's fine. If it's fine, you can release to more users. If it's fine, then to more and more. If it's not fine, you can roll back. And for example, for mobile apps, you have already built in store. You can define how often you can split into chunks, and then you plan. During the first week, it will be 5% for my Android app. Then you have 10% next week, and so on. And regarding A/B tests, that's pretty similar. So you split your customers into one and into actually not two. You can provide more experiments, and you check if the new feature is better than the old feature. Or you can have two options. So for example, if you want to provide subscription plans, you can check if the price is suitable for them. And then you aggregate results. The second one is more, so production usage. It's like pure DevOps. So you can count number of errors, number of 500 responses. You can measure performance of your nodes, which was like the last topic about Kubernetes clusters and so on. And you can make some decision based on that. You can trigger alerts and so on. And the last part, which is active monitors, and it's also called synthetic monitoring, as I remember, it will be later. It's running subset of test cases on a production. So something, I suppose if I would say it 5 years ago, that we run tests on production, it will be like, ooh. And now it's not that bad. Actually, even Google, in some departments, or Facebook, they do not test at all, just on production. So they put new software, because they deliver in 10 seconds, and then just run a subset. And there is one big advantage of running tests on production. If you have dependencies with external services, like for example payments, you do not control it fully, because they are just provider of the service. And having it on a production, you can check the whole user flow from the very beginning to the end, like the user really behave. And then you check if not just your part of software is working, but the whole product, because from the customer perspective, it's always one product, even if we have connections with external services. And what happens then, we have data, but not just fail or pass. We can much better calculate. So for example, our performance or our pass rate is 99%, which is good enough. We won't mark it as pass. Or we have, let's say, for 1,000 requests, we have 1 or 2 400 responses, and it's acceptable. So we don't have just binary decision, but we can make decision based on data. So define KPIs, patterns, and so on. So let's move forward. How it looks like from process perspective. The first step, really understandable. We have code, we make some commits, then we can test, and finally merge. Whatever the tool is, it's just about process. Then you have another continuous part, which is continuous validation. So this is not production yet, but after it's merged, you can run, before it's merged, when it's commit, you can run any of tests, like unit, integration, or system tests. It depends on the context. It depends on your company. And then you have continuous delivery as the last part. So if everything is fine, you push it into production. So I'm just curious, but who of you can say that continuous delivery is practiced at the company, at your company? That's not that bad, like 15 hands. It could be worse, really. But except for this, which is continuous delivery, you have one additional part. One of them is DevOps, which means monitoring, and then visualizing whatever the tool is, Kibana, Grafana, and so on. And the last part, which is uncommon, is that synthetic monitoring. So periodically, you run a subset of tests, aggregate data, and of course, you can visualize it. You can trigger alerts, but it's not based on production usage, but on your tests. One important thing, it must be stable, because if it's not, then you have problem, you have false alerts, and so on. And investigation is not very comfortable. So, yeah, that's the quick summary what the continuous monitoring or semantic monitoring is. Run a subset of tests, then aggregating results, and check if your product is fine. And from my experience, we had a lot of situations when external provider service was not working, and we get an information before the customers wrote us like in a very angry manner. So that was a quick introduction to TestOps, because I don't want to focus on the concept itself, but to show you some examples. So what means TestOps? At first, it's not setting up the whole infrastructure. If you have DevOps approach, actually implemented DevOps approach, not just mentioned, then you can put your part into this continuous integration or delivery pipeline. And then you can choose when, how many, and how often to run your subsets. More or less understandable what TestOps really is? Okay, so silence means agreement. Of course. Now, why we should care so much? Because it's not just about TestOps. Because to have TestOps, you need to have DevOps. But maybe there is a way to focus more on process automation. So let's consider why we should care so much. At first, everything is continuous. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous, even if you think about your personal development, continuous improvement, and so on. But because of that, we can have a lot of fakes, or actually, there are two types. It's the two most common parts. It's false positive and false negative. Who knows what it is? False positive and false negative. It's from ISTQB and so on and so on. So it's not that important. I will explain you on the picture. So the first one is when you get false and you expect true. And the second one is opposite situation. So you get true when you expect false. And it happens every time. So you just constantly get bad results. But except for that, there is something which is much worse to detect. And it's called flaky tests. Anyone who's familiar with that description? That's bad. That's very bad. So flaky test means if you run your test 10 times, same environment, same conditions, you get sometimes false, sometimes true. You can just draw dice like Caesar, and the dice were thrown. For example, there are some approaches. For example, Google run it in a way when the test case is written, they run it like 10 times, I think, during the whole regression suite. If they get the same result, then they put it as a part of test suite. Until that, it's treated and marked as unstable, as flaky. It's one of the solutions, but not the perfect one. So that's the first reason why we should focus. It's continuous delivery and DevOps approach, very simplified on the process. So you see, the important thing is you cannot have really DevOps without continuous delivery or integration, and you cannot have continuous delivery without Agile. And Agile means not necessarily means Scrum. That's the important thing, because Agile is the approach. Scrum is just the framework. So I personally work, I have no idea what it is, if it's Kanban or Scrum. It's like hybrid, but I must say it's kind of agile. So you have collaboration, which means the more collaboration, the more automatic way, the more value. But I decided to exchange because value is true. But if you have automation, then you have risk connected with false positive and flaky tests. Just to not understand me wrong, I don't want to say that the more automation, the more risk, because then you can get back to the company and say, hey, there was a speaker who said automation, risk. So let's remove it and start testing manually. No, you just need to be aware of that and maybe somehow mitigate or put more monitoring, put more effort into detection of bad behavior. Okay, that's the first thing. The second one, oh, yeah, I forgot. That's the second smart sentence. Much more smart. Then I have no idea what I'm doing. So just to summarize, automation means value, but be aware of the risk that can happen. The second part are startups or high-tech companies. So I'm connected with startups from 5 years already. Like I went through 3 of them. Oh, I think it's even more than 5 years. And there is always the same problem. Doesn't matter which area, if it's IoT or educational platform or beacons or Bluetooth, there is lack of time because of, like at first, the methodology. You need to decide to skip some parts to deliver faster. It's not bad, but you need to find compromise. Then documentation. Of course, no time for documentation. Who can say you have like complex documentation at your company? You can look at documentation and then say how it works. Good for you. Not enough testers, of course, because we prefer to invest in developers than testers. And the worst thing, you invest in events. You invest to deliver something to show off investors, because if they won't give you money, the company won't survive, which is understandable, but the quality really suffer. And chaotic environment. Very often changing requirements because like my investor, my venture capital said he wants to this feature and so on. And we need to make, that's my favorite word, it's called pivot. So you need to change the direction of your development instantly. And the third thing, there are multiple names for that. I like the name of unicorn dilemma. So you have speed, you have quality, and you have cost. Usually you have to choose between two. Of course, it's comfortable if you don't care about price, because you work for big companies. But in other contexts, you need to somehow find the balance. So let's do not focus on price, because we talk about speed and quality. So speed versus quality. Which is more important? Silence. I know that. That's always hard to answer. But let's try to somehow do speed and quality at the same time. And then, if you have speed and quality, there is something called quick wins. Anyone familiar with that? And that's what I expected. Quick wins is just, I would say, managerial approach to gain immediate advantage over your competitors. So to not put a lot of effort, like maybe a few hours or days, and get instant result. And it can be something really small, like small part of automation in that context, and you get, you can speed up something by, I don't know, 30%. And I have 3 examples how those quick wins can look like. So let's try to implement quick win. Let's think about what in our context can really matter. And our stack will be like that. The very important thing, it's never about tools you use. It's about process, it's about approach. Because what you can see here, For now, I use just Jira and Slack. Everything else, tool to test management, CI/CD, and reporting is different. So let's have complex stack for project process management for development. And let's start with first example. Who is familiar with the situation when someone comes and we don't have time for automation? Let's make some quick ad hoc testing. Yeah. you can raise your hand twice, or like 2 hands, or even legs, if you're comfortable with that. So for me, it was pretty painful because we had a lot of releases and we had a lot of test cases, and some of them were connected to only front end, some of them were connected to only back end, some to mobile application only, and some of them were across everything. Like it was in mobile application as well as in web platform. So what was the idea? It's like from Jira, from Zephyr. What was the idea? Well, let's break down what we have. We have test bucket, so all the tests we have. Then the most common approach is that we have test suites. And for some reason, in Zephyr, it's called test cycle. I have no idea. Let's keep the nomenclature test suite. Funny thing, in X-Ray, which is another plugin for Zephyr, there is different name. I have no, I don't remember now which one, but they are not really consistent. So let's stay with test suites. And then for every test suite, you have number of test cases. It can be, test suite can be per feature or per microservice or whatever. So that's how we broke down. And then we have successful product. Every product you work with is successful. That's the mission, that's the vision, that's the goal of the company. And for sure you believe it, yeah, right. Otherwise you won't work at your current company. And you have different parts. Let's say front and back end, iOS and Android. The simplest one, the simplest. And I think the most popular. And then what happens, the new request for feature that covers one or few of those areas, and you have no idea which one. And at first, you need to spend a lot of time to choose those test cases. Let's say you have those test cases. Every letter is like, to make it funny, quality, you know, quality test cases. For every test case, it touches different areas. So it can be just for Android and backend, or it can be for front-end, backend, and iOS only, because not every feature is common for everyone. You can have, for example, change only in your profile, yeah? Or you can have something under the hood change, like communication between microservices. So you don't want to necessarily run all those tests, because it's time-consuming. So let's try to mark it. Let's try to choose all those test cases we want to run to not spend too much time and do it faster. And then when it's chosen, you can take all of them, and it shows that you don't need to execute everything. You don't need to run the whole regression suite. You just need to run what is needed. And you can speed up by half, or you can speed up by 30%. That's just the value. The most important thing, you can speed up. You can speed up the process. And that's Jenkins. Oh, yeah. Rocket science, it's Jenkins here. And you can approach that way. Probably implementation is pretty simple. We have API from Jira, and you have Jenkins, and to set up, if you are familiar, it's like 15 minutes. And in a few hours, you can prepare that automation that allows your manual testers to just put release version, the area or areas that is touched, and then just click run. And as a result, all those suites, all those test cases that should be chosen are prepared. So as a result, you have test environment ready to be run by manual testers. First example, not a lot of effort, but speed up by some value. Okay, the second one, project management workflow. Do you recognize that flow? What is the framework? Sure. So what is? Yeah, it's Kanban. So there's just free, how it's called, columns, and you can drag and drop. But most projects are more complicated. We need more states, so let's put that one. So you have code review, you have development ready, and then if it's ready, you have QA in progress, so you can start working. But for me, always the question was where to start. Let's say you have feature, you have bug. Of course, every feature is like bug where in a suite, yeah, because there is when you put off suite, it's again bug. It's some joke from Twitter. Not so funny, but why not? And then you make transitions. You made bug fixing, and the developer transitioned it to development ready because it's ready. And for me, the question was always if I should start testing. So it's transitioned, and from development perspective, it's ready. But I have no idea if it's deployed or it's just in the bucket in Git. So for me, the answer was always D. Only God knows. But God never answered to me. So we need to we had to find another solution to somehow approach in a semi-automatic way. And we added one more step, means QA ready. And the difference between dev ready and QA ready was deployment stage. And you have different part. For software, for web part, it's much easier because you can deploy. For mobile app or firmware, you need to wait until it's built. And usually it takes from a couple of minutes to even hours. So you don't know if dev ready means you start testing. And that's why this additional step. And that's the process we decided to run. So just after code is merged and it's deployed, we run tests because it's like a few or even more slides before, you saw the whole process of continuous delivery. So that's this part, except for Jira Organizer. And Jira Organizer is just for just to let you know if it's already deployed and we can start testing. And this is the perfect visualization. So you have dev ready state, and when it's deployed, there is another job in continuous integration that is run, and it makes transition to the proper state. So let's say feature doesn't need testing because it's like business one or something, and it's transitioned to done. So you are not confused that you don't have to that you have to test it, or if you have to test it. And bug fixing is transferred to QA ready, so you can start testing. Oh no, I don't have any funny picture. Damn. Okay, but that's the solution. Again, you did one job. You had one job. So you made a quick automation, which means when it's deployed, I run organizer. I transition between all the statuses, and I know where to start. And now the good thing is not God only knows, because I know as well. And the third example, which is closer to real DevOps, it's mobile app handling. Are you familiar with that picture, more or less? It's Crashlytics. It's for mobile app, and you can gather some data here. I have highlighted, some values. So for example, you have information how many defects, how many crashes you faced during the last 24 hours. How many users were affected, or what is the success rate. It's already delivered, so you have all that information. But maybe we should somehow react on that. And maybe if there is something really wrong, we should decide, make some logic and automation to make it simple. Because, you know what? Let's say we have, I will talk, you can start reading. You can have 100 crashes in a day. And the problem is, if you have 100 users faced, so every user had just one crash. Or you can have 10 users, and 10 users crashed 10 times every time, 10 times a day. So if you had just one crash, probably you will skip it and say, something happened. If you will have 10 crashes, you will say, fuck that shit, and you just uninstall app. So that's the difference. You never had just one factor. You can lose 10% of your users, or you can lose nothing because it just happened. Okay, so who went through the description? Good for you, because that was not that important. It was not important at all, because I just explained that we should somehow approach that, and it's pure business analyst job to decide when we should alert, when we should trigger that something happened. And our job is to make it easy, to set up thresholds, to set up boundary values, and so on. So let's do it. We have process, again. So here is just simplified continuous delivery. And you have Crashlytics, so you can pull data from that source. And then, based on that logic delivered by business people, probably business intelligence, I think that's the proper name, you can provide it to your DevOps tools. I highlighted 3 of them. So the first one is Kibana, which means you can visualize. You can always enter, see logs, and the most important for product people, you have graphs and colors and bars and pie charts. Then you have Jira, which is collaboration tool, so you can always alert. You have Slack, and you can alert, and you have Jira, so you can maybe create bugs in an automatic way. So if you have alert, then you just put all the logs and create bugs in Jira. So let's go through that. The first thing, creating bugs in Jira. Again, depending on data, you can create, or you can mark the proper priority and just put it. When it's created, I don't want to say your job, but it's up to product and team if they want to fix it. But you did your job. You found a defect, you reported everything needed, you put all the logs, and you can make some reactions. But that's fortunately for you is the last smart sentence. I faced one problem. When something was fixed, we closed it, and later, when something similar happened, we didn't really catch it. So who had a situation like you fix something, and after half a year or a year, the same problem returned? I like you. We are on the same page. So that's the problem. It can return, and automation, it's not that easy to catch that. So that's another Twitter picture I found. Yeah, you fixed one, and then you have, let me count, 28 more. And you should somehow catch it. So the most important thing here, if you want to create it, similar automation is to remember that you can face similar thing in the future, and you should somehow handle it in your automation. The second part is alerting and notifications. For Slack, it's simple. So probably a lot of you have connected CI/CD environment with Slack. And if, I don't know, for example, something is built or deployed, you get an alert. So that's the same situation. When something is created in Jira, you get an alert. Or even more important, it's not you get an alert, but developers get an alert. So they cannot say that you didn't say them. Now you have just a clear communication. And the last thing is visualization. You can use Kibana, you can use Grafana. There are many other tools. And then whoever wants to just take a look, you can present it. And it's quite easy to set up. OK, but I mentioned about a lot of things that simplify or maybe even somehow do developers' job. Because we do automation, we help them to catch bugs on a production, we help them to automate process, and so on. So what is the real, or how the developer's role should change in that approach? Well, my answer is that it shouldn't, and that the cut is just to be here. Because when I finished the presentation, I realized I have no cut. It's like the crime for the presentation. So the developer's role is to do the same job, to keep the good quality, to write the good code, and your duty is to support them, to speed up process, to simplify process, or to capture, detect, and alert if something happens. Good. We are close to the end. I will summarize what I just said. So you have two parts. You have TestOps, which is common approach, and you have something to be much easier to implement because you can do it every time without the DevOps approach at your company. So small parts of automation that helps you to speed up or improve. The first thing, TestOps is just another approach. Like DevOps, for me, it's not a position, it's just culture. You can agree, you can argue, because DevOps is now like the hot word, but DevOps, like Agile, is just the culture of delivering, not the position. Then you have what really matters. It provides you the specific perspective to test and provide quality in your continuous integration pipeline. So, and one of the most important things, not just here, but at all, when you work with product and you take care about automation. It's never about choosing the tool, it's always about finding the good approach and then adapt the tool to that approach. So I worked and still working for startups. The very comfortable thing is I'm free to choose tools, but as you could see, among those 5 tools, I use just 1 or 2 of them because Slack is 90% of the market and Jira probably 95%. But everything else changed. And that's not because someone forced me to do it. That's because we first try to solve the problem and then we choose the tool to solve that problem, the best tool to solve it. So never focus on tools, focus on problem solving. And something that companies very often forget about. You need time for that. If you want to provide some improvements, you need to put your effort, but you need time for that effort. So maybe somehow, if you want to try it, you want to invest your time in research, you want to invest your time in improvement, you should talk to your boss or colleagues and somehow split the time and spend like 10% of your total time to, let's say, have fun and improve, and then show results. Because very important is that if you make fail, then you quickly know it's not the right direction, and you can change it. But you need time. So maybe it's the right time to talk to your boss. Who's afraid of talking to boss? No one is now raising hand. Okay, and I really suggest you to think about quick wins. I started with quick wins because it's managerial approach, so it's close to what I do every day, but I just transformed it from management part to process and automation part. And maybe that's the solution. If you cannot spend the whole time because you have no DevOps, no continuous integration, no continuous delivery, maybe you can just choose the small parts, invest some time, and improve. And the last thing, explore and investigate, and to not be afraid of making failures. Because making failure is fine. It's kind of US culture. I have no idea why it doesn't really work in Europe very often, but I prefer to make failures, because I don't know that was not the best decision. Cool, that's everything. If you have any questions, I think we have still a couple of minutes. Thanks. No question? I know, so sorry guys, I know it's lunchtime. Just 10 seconds, I will make a selfie. And now you can eat. If you have any questions, because I won't be here any longer, I need to catch my flight, you can find me in not Facebook, Facebook as well, but LinkedIn or Twitter. So thanks.